Money, banking, power. Sir Paul Tucker has seen it all during his 30 years at the Bank of England, especially unchecked power at the very pinnacle of the world's top monetary institutions and the people who control those financial levers. It's the topic of his new book, Unelected Power, the quest for legitimacy in central banking and the regulatory state. Welcome to Power Lunch.
Well, thank you for having me.
Unelected power. You know, there's a lot of critics of central banks in the world that think that central banks have way too much power, especially because they're not elected. Do central bankers have too much power in the world?
Some central bankers think they have, and I'm nervous about it. I want them to be reined in a bit to make them safe for our system of government.
How?
I believe in democracy. We need to give them clear objectives and clear constraints on their powers. So people were surprised by what we, as I then was, could do in 2009 through to 2013, 14. And that shouldn't have been a surprise, and there should have been more limits around it.
You're referring to all the massive intervention that happened around the world during the financial crisis. You're saying you should not have been allowed to do some of those things?
Well, I think there should have been more careful limits. Central banks should not be allowed to provide support to firms that are fundamentally bust, that haven't just run out of money. There's no repairing them.
That's one of the rules of central banking, by the way, originally.
Well, it was, going back to the 19th century. Central banks should not be able to direct credit over here rather than over there, favoring one part of the economy over another part of the economy. They need to focus on the key mission of keeping the monetary system, the banking system as a whole stable.
But what would have happened after the financial crisis? I mean, aren't they largely credited with helping save the system from an all-out collapse and preventing a depression?
Well, that's true, too, which is why the question is tough. If you go back 90 years, 80 years, 90 years to the Great Depression, the elected politicians did much more. This time, they stepped back.
They gave them a pass.
And let my tribe step forward. And they had no choice. So I'm not I don't regret anything.
There's the result. Major central bank assets, just how much they've all got on their balance sheet. Is that dangerous?
It would be dangerous if it stayed there forever. They need to run this down when they can, not in a rush, not in a way that suddenly brings back the problems, but when they can, they need to get back to a normal-sized balance sheet.
Can that be done without major disruption? I mean, people look at the massive rally that we've seen in a lot of different asset classes as a result of they think is a result of quantitative easing, and as quantitative easing is rolled back, they think it is inevitable that you see a lot of asset bubbles they think burst.
Some of it, I think, can happen naturally as just the securities mature. I'm not against, when the time comes, the Fed, the Bank of England, the ECB selling some assets, but they're going to have to take care that the core of the financial system has enough capital to weather the volatility. They shouldn't be frightened by the volatility. They should be sure that the firms can weather the volatility.
Are you worried about political interference right now in central banking as a result of all of this power? I mean, you have President Trump, at least he campaigned criticizing Janet Yellen. So far, he's sort of steered clear of the central bank. But it feels like we're getting close to that.
It's always tempting. It's always tempting for any president, any prime minister, any chancellor of Germany. And they can put pressure on through the media, through public opinion. And the central banker's protection is the clarity of their objective, and they just have to stick to that. And where the edges are fuzzy, well, then politicians can exploit those fuzzy edges.
The traditional way, historically, politicians have intervened with central banks is to pressure them to keep interest rates lower.
Yeah.
However, what has been tremendous criticism in this country is that they've kept interest rates too low, and hence led to a misallocation of resources and capital in ways that never would have happened and shouldn't have happened. It's been detrimental. What do you think of that argument?
I think it would have been better in this country had there been more fiscal stimulus and less monetary stimulus going back half a decade. It's kind of ironic that the fiscal stimulus comes now.
As the monetary stimulus goes away.
Just as the economy is recovering nicely. The politicians didn't. After the initial crisis in 2009, the politicians didn't want to do that. They didn't want to do the brave thing. I mean, you know, I'm a foreigner, but infrastructure expenditure in this country would have been a good thing.
Helpful a few years ago, yeah.
Do you think central bankers, particularly in the United States, have acknowledged the trade-offs of what they've done? It seems that we get pushback when there's this criticism that asset bubbles have occurred, that capital has gone to areas where it wouldn't have gone, where I hear people say, I put my grandmother in high yield. There were trade-offs to what happened, and they could be costly.
I would rather they said we had to make some big choices to save this economy. There were some side effects that aren't great, but better we acted than not act.
Do you think any of this is actually going to get done? Nobody's talking about actually implementing changes to central bank policy.
In slow motion, yeah. I think you can affect the climate of opinion. If you go back 20 years, people thought differently about it than they do now. You can influence the climate of opinion.
Well, you've started it with this light beach reading, 500 plus pages.
It's a sad beach.
Thank you, Sir Paul Tucker. Good to have you on.
No, thanks a lot.
His book is called Unelected Power, The Quest for Legitimacy in Central Banking and the Regulatory State.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.